Hey, what's up, everybody? Well, James Gunn's Superman has finally arrived, and yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. This is going to be kind of a blend of a review, kind of a rant, just kind of a general conversation about my thoughts on the movie. For those of you that are curious and wondering right off the bat, I had moments that I enjoyed of the movie, other moments I didn't. Overall, for an actual review of the film, I gave it a 5 out of 10. You can also check my review out over on criticalist.com if you want to actually have more thoughts about that and kind of see a little bit more of a breakdown on that. As far as my thoughts, I just kind of want to delve more into my actual thoughts about the movie and my feelings as I was watching it. I like James Gunn as a director. I think he has moments of brilliance. I loved his Guardians movies, 1, 2, and 3. I loved all three of them. I loved his treatment of the Suicide Squad. I like James Gunn. I think he's cool. I think he's a cool director. But I also think that James Gunn has benefited from being able to utilize comic book characters and comic book stories that people aren't super heavily familiar with. And when that's the case, and when people aren't super familiar with the source material, you can be really flexible about what they can do and who they are and what they represent and the themes behind them that are typically, consistent in the comic books. A big point of contention amongst a lot of comic book fans is like the way Drax the Destroyer is portrayed, because Drax in the comic books is a far cry from Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. But I digress about that. The actual thoughts when it comes to Superman, I really feel like James Gunn played it safe here. I think more than anything, that was what I was disappointed by. This Superman, while having a very distinct James Gunn tone, doesn't feel like it has its own identity. It doesn't feel like it establishes itself beyond James Gunn's body of work. It feels like it's relying on his previous bodies of work to make this movie work for the audiences. You watch James Gunn, you know what to expect from his films, and you get exactly what you expect. And I think that more than anything was the disappointment, because Superman isn't just some random knockoff character that nobody knows anything about. He's one of the most iconic superheroes of all time. So there's an expectation going into that you're going to get something from him that feels distinct, that feels like it honors the source material, feels like it honors people's expectations of who Superman is and what he's supposed to be, his ideals and his themes, while also having maybe a unique flair or a different angle on Superman than what we've seen. As far as the aesthetics go, I do enjoy it. Metropolis feels cool. We don't get to see a ton of it, but Metropolis feels like a mix of modern and then like an art deco, with a kind of bright, modernistic tone that we don't really get with like Gotham City, if you compare it to things like the Batman, which these aren't in the same universe, but the idea behind them and the idea behind the city is there. But even with that, we don't spend a lot of time in Metropolis getting to know how Metropolis works. We also don't get a lot of time in the Daily Planet. We see it, and we're inside the Daily Planet throughout the movie, a couple different scenes, but it all feels like it's in service to the plot. Not like the Daily Planet is this thriving, bustling, beacon of journalism. It feels like everybody kind of is just sitting around until somebody in the group of Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, or Clark Kent stand up to do something. And that part of it kind of sucks. We get to see Perry White, but we really don't get much from Perry White. He just kind of sits around, and then every chance he gets, he puts a cigar in his mouth. So it kind of feels like characters like Perry are boiled down to like one-note caricatures of what we know they could be or what they could represent. Little things like that are things that add depth to a film and add depth to a comic book IP like this, and it gives you a chance to really touch on certain things that people love. Oh, I love Perry White because of this, or I like this character, I like that character. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a deep dive into their character motivations or anything, but for them to feel one note when it feels like more time could have been spent on them to kind of establish this world and get us caught up to how things feel and how things operate in this world would have been really nice. This is for people that don't know, superheroes in this universe have existed for over 300 years. And Superman has been active for 3 of those years. And so we step into this, and Superman's already been active for a while, and it doesn't feel like Superman's clipping along and just kind of doing his thing. It actually kind of feels like Superman hasn't been super active. It doesn't feel like Superman's been super active in this world for 3 years. This very much feels like we are jumping into the most interesting part of Superman's life at the most interesting part of him being a superhero, and that before that really relatively nothing has happened. The movie itself starts in what's called in medias res. It's in the middle of the action, and it's right after Superman gets beat up by a character that's supposed to be getting revenge on Superman for invading his country, or for stopping his country from invading another country, and that character is later revealed to actually be a clone of Superman called Ultraman, which Ultraman is not a clone of Superman, but whatever. But we join Superman in the very beginning of the movie with him at his very lowest point. He just got beat up for the first time and lost a fight. And that's how we're introduced to him. Not as a superhero that's doing things and bustling and winning and doing well, but as a Superman that's been defeated and broken and beaten. And then we're introduced to one of my least favorite parts of this film, Krypto. I know that Krypto is partially written because James Gunn loves his dog, and I know that there's some of that energy and some of that camaraderie in this film. As an idea, I don't hate Krypto. And even in the certain moments in the film, I think he's good to have there. I think he's an interesting take on this. I think it's fun to have him. I think he adds something enjoyable to the film when he's there. But I feel like that kind of a character, somebody like Krypto, needs to be used sparingly. Specifically because you either make Krypto so competent as a dog that it doesn't have the same relatability that other dogs do, or you make him you go the way that this movie goes, where you make him a very poorly behaved, kind of wild, reckless animal. There isn't really a middle ground. Like, Krypto's pretty much just a bad dog in this film, and I kind of don't like that because it's a personal preference. I'm not a fan of animals that don't have good manners. You know, a poorly trained animal it's kind of like frustrating, because you go like, man, that could be real problem down the line. And we kind of see that a little bit with Krypto, where we know the first time we go to the Fortress of Solitude, there's all this damage done to it because of Krypto, and things like that. But without getting super heavy into the weeds with Krypto, overall I feel like he's in the movie too much, and that really bothered me. He just overstays his welcome to the point where I just didn't want to see the dog anymore. And Mr. Terrific actually mentions that later in the movie. The dog shows up and he goes, "You brought that damn dog along?" Like, it's just one of those things. Yeah, Krypto quickly overstays his welcome in the film, and that's a big part of my gripes with this film, is just things like that. That Krypto gets all of this screen time and all of this is stuff because James Gunn's a huge fan of the idea of him and a big fan of dogs. But then other characters feel like they needed more time and more development than they did, and get virtually no screen time, or almost no screen time. And a big part of that is the Kents. Mom, Pa Kent in this do not get a lot of screen time. We don't get to spend a lot of time with them, getting to know them, or what kind of people they are and what kind of values they instilled into Clark as a kid. I like the aesthetic that they have when you go to their house. They've got cows, they're on a farm, but it's not a super nice house. It's kind of like a double wide. And so it feels like the, lower class, blue collar working Americans. But I've loved to have seen even a dinner scene with Clark and his parents or something, just to feel like we're really getting to know Clark and his parents and where he came from, even just for a split second. And we don't really get that. We get a little bit of interaction between them, but not enough to really make this mean something. The same with Lois, because in the film, when they go to his parents, Lois is with them. We never really get to see Lois interacting with his parents very much. It would have been nice to have seen her get to see a glimpse into Clark's life behind the scenes a little bit more, or get to her for her to get a little bit more understanding, because that builds that romantic tension between them. You know, which leads me to the relationship between Lois and Clark. I think it works for the most part. I think they have good chemistry. I like Rachel Brosnahan. I think she's a great actress. I like David Cornsweet. I think he does a good job as Superman. I also think he does a good job as Clark, but we really only see him as like Clark the Mask one time in the film, and the rest of the time it's him in his in-between state where he's Clark, the person who people know is Superman, but it doesn't have to necessarily hide from other people. And I like that part of Clark too, but it's nice to see the diametrically opposed ideas. It's nice to see Clark, the mild-mannered, goofy, kind of nerdy reporter, versus Superman, the beacon of hope in Metropolis and in the world. And then that blend of both, the Kal-El, Clark Kent version that we see when he's with Lois and when he's with his parents and stuff, where he doesn't have to hide himself, but he's also not in Superman mode. We get a lot more of that with Clark than anything, and I really wish we could have seen more of the secret identity part. And we just don't get that. But Lois does a pretty good job. I think that they really try to sell the romance between them very quickly, and then right after that get into them kind of having like relationship troubles. They kind of establish, oh, we've been together for a little while, we've kind of been doing this for a little bit, and we're supposed to kind of just like eat that and absorb that. And so then we have to just roll with the fact that they do have natural chemistry with each other, but it would have been nice to have seen a little bit more of the foundations of that relationship, whether it's on rocky ground or not. It would have been nice to have seen a little bit more of that blossom, but once again, that kind of is sacrificed in favor of other things in the movie. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, I think, does a really good job. I think he's really enjoyable. I think he's a lot of fun. He verges on mustache twirling villain, but in a good way. I think he at times, when he has time to really chew the scenery, whether it's sitting in a chair or just standing still, or whether it's battling his arch nemesis Superman, or giving orders to his mooks around him and stuff, I think he does a really good job. But when it comes time to push the plot forward and be involved in his like grand plan, that's kind of the central theme of the movie, that's when he really gets restricted. And you almost feel like he's clamped down and forced to play out a scenario that I think that could have been a better scenario for him, giving him more reasons to be a villain and giving him more reasons to act well and do well. I think he does the best that he can with the script, and that's another thing that a lot of people are saying about this, and I wholeheartedly agree with. There's a lot of people doing the best despite the script kind of being in their way. The script is the weakest part of this whole film. There are some really cool stylized fights. I think they work for the most part. Things like characters like Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner, who are part of the Justice Gang along with Hawkgirl. Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific are like two of the best characters in the film. Mr. Terrific is awesome. He's competent. He's very smart. He's also not a people person. And so you kind of get to the idea of why he's not maybe a bigger hero and a bigger name, because he's not really interested in people. He's out here doing his thing and being a hero because he has so much intelligence. He has to put it somewhere. Guy Gardner is a Green Lantern, but he's also a jerk and that nobody really likes. And Nathan Fillion does a great job of selling that. And I really enjoyed that part of the movie when he's in it. He's a fun juxtaposition to Superman in that he's this very jaded, selfish, in for himself hero, versus Superman, who's supposed to be this selfless, like, love everybody hero. So there's some interesting things. Hawkgirl absolutely gets the shaft in this film. Hawkgirl's awful. She pretty much just does like, she sits on a couch and reads a newspaper, and then the couple times that she's active as Hawkgirl, she just like screeches really loudly, and then that's it. There's not really a lot of development for her, which is kind of a disappointment, because it would have been nice to have seen those characters working alongside of each other, Or if you want to do this thing where there's other heroes that are working, instead of having 3, have like 10. Have too many characters to do anything with, and see that in the future we'll get to see more of these characters doing things. But right now, you know, you have Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific are the 2 that are the least occupied right now and have to involve themselves in what's happening in the plot. That could have been really interesting. So yeah, the plot itself is very comic book, feels very comic book, in good ways and in bad ways. It gets a little silly at times. I don't think silliness is necessarily a bad thing in comic book films, but it's sometimes when you have an inconsistent tone, or sometimes when the pacing is off. And that's the problem with this film when it comes to the script. Sometimes the pacing's off, sometimes it's inconsistent in its tone, and sometimes it feels a little sporadic, like things are just kind of happening. And when that is the case, it makes things jarring and it makes things really difficult to focus on, which means that the plot has to be really simplistic to make it work. The plot is very simplistic, for the most part. There is one other major gripe that I have in the treatment of Clark's parents, Jor-El and Lara. They are revealed in the film to be something other than what we know Jor-El and Lara to be. They're essentially like villains who sent their son to like enslave the world, or at least that's what the film tells you. And you know, people have been speculating about this idea that maybe it was all a lie because Lex interpreted it. Some people are saying no, because the film kind of goes out of its way to tell you that it is true, but that doesn't matter because it's not as important as Clark doing the right thing despite that message. But I kind of think that even having that be the message of his parents is inherently wrong based on what we know, because of a bigger point that I'm getting to now, which is James Gunn chose to forego Superman having an origin story in this film. He said, we don't need to see his origin story. We don't need to know his origin story. We've seen it a million times. How many times do we have to watch Krypton explode? That's not nearly as important as telling a story. And I can agree with that up to a point if you know that what the origin story of this character is consistent with what most people know about the origin story of this character. But when you make Jor-El and Lara do something that is counter to what we know of their character based on comic books, based on other Superman IPs, based on other Superman projects, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's when you go, man, I kind of wish I would have known what was going on in the background, or at least hinted at it a little bit more, than to just be thrown into the fact that, oh, never mind, I guess they were bad people this whole time. You know, I wish I would have known that was going to be the case, so I could have prepared myself for the fact that these are villains and they're not good people and they're not they didn't send their son to Earth for the right reasons, you know? Then you could have at least prepared for that and known that things were going to play out a little bit differently. And that makes the Kents shine better when they're like, hey, Clark, you got to make the right choices and make whatever choices you feel are right, but it's based on what you do and how you do it, and helping people and serving people that make you a hero, not just the message that your parents left you. I think that could have been an interesting exploration, but it's not really explored. We get like one good nugget of wisdom from Pa Kent. And the rest of the film, they're just portrayed as very simple, very slow people who found this kid one time. We never really feel the weight of him, and they're raising an alien son. You know, and I think there are some sweet moments. The moments that we have on screen with them can be really sweet because of how affectionate they can be towards Clark, but it feels like they're trying to cover a lot of emotional ground very quickly. And some of those moments just really need to breathe and have a little bit more time to develop. And we don't really get that, which, once again, another, you know, thing on the pile of complaints that I have is that James Gunn can do humor really well. He can make very funny movies. Guardians is funny. The Guardians films are funny. Suicide Squad is very funny. You know, he did the movie with Rainn Wilson where Rainn Wilson is also a superhero. I think it's called Super. That's funny. You know, like, James Gunn can do humor really well. But humor has its place, and when it's used to undercut a moment of drama or a moment of character development, it just feels and rings really hollow. And that's kind of what happens in this film. There's a lot of moments where you feel like you're going to get a really beautiful emotional moment or payoff to something, and then it's very quickly ruined by humor. One of the most egregious examples of that is at the end of the film when Clark, finally thwarts Lex Luthor and stops Ultraman and confronts him, and he gives this impassioned speech about being human, or his humanity being his greatest strength, and all that stuff, and Lex Luthor kind of wasting all of his humanity and by being a villain and all that stuff. That moment is quickly interrupted and cut short by Krypto bursting into the room and grabbing Lex Luthor and essentially having a Hulk Loki moment where, in the Avengers, Hulk grabs Loki and smashes him around a bunch. That's what Krypto does here to Lex Luthor, and it just feels really weird and very hollow and completely undercuts the moment that Superman has there. So yeah, that was a big gripe I have with this film. Like I said, I like David Corenswet as Superman, but he's also probably one of the weaker versions of Superman that we've ever seen on screen, I should say. He is the strongest metahuman, but it feels like if power scales went to 10, Guy Gardner's like a 7 and Superman's like an 8. It doesn't feel like Superman is the 10 out of 10 hero that we've known him to be everywhere else. It feels like he's just slightly more powerful than other metahumans. And, maybe down the line he'll get more powerful. We'll see. I don't know. It just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like Superman is this being that we should aspire to. And ultimately, I think as I chewed more on this movie and thought more about it, that was something that I got more and more disheartened by, is that Superman doesn't feel inspiring in this film. He doesn't feel iconic. He doesn't feel larger than life. He just feels like a guy in a suit that can fly and do all the crazy weird things that Superman can do. But none of it is inspiring enough to feel like he can overcome any obstacle or battle anything that he comes across. None of it feels like he should be inspiring hope in the people around him, or that when at nighttime or during the day, when there's a disaster that happens, people should call out to him. There is a moment in this film where a young boy creates a flag with Superman's symbol on it to and almost kind of praise that Superman will show up to save him. And you go, oh, wow, that's a beautiful moment. And then and to pay that off, you would expect Superman shows up to help. That's what you hope would happen, is that Superman shows up and saves the boy, and the boy's prayers are answered, and Superman saves the day. That doesn't happen. Instead, another hero shows up and says, yeah, I know you wanted Superman, but you got the upgrade instead, kid. And then proceeds to fight people to some stylized music and stuff. And even though Superman does save the day dealing with this other conflict in the film, because I know that's people are going to say there were two conflicts, Superman can't be two places at one time. The idea is that Superman is powerful enough to do both, is powerful enough to save two people, and for every person that wants to complain or compare or draw comparisons to things, this is not me trying to compare the two, because I don't think they're comparable, but the original Superman with Christopher Reeve, we have a moment where he goes back in time. He turns the Earth back on its axis and goes back in time to save Lois and to stop Lex Luthor. He does both because he's Superman. And we don't know what he's capable of until he really pushes himself. In this, we never feel like Superman's pushing himself beyond his limits. I never feel like Superman's rising to the occasion. It always feels like he's barely eking out a win. He's barely getting past, things, barely squeaking by and giving the best that he possibly, giving pretty much almost the best he can. Like if this Superman, if other Superman projects that we've seen and IPs that we've seen, Superman's giving 110%, the Superman's like giving 90%, even at his very best. And that really sucks, because it would have been nice to have at least one moment where it feels like Superman is pushing beyond his limits and pushed to the very brink of what he's capable of. There's a moment where we almost get that when he's fighting somebody, but it's a very anticlimactic ending to that scene. Yeah, so, ultimately, I just think that this was kind of a swing and a miss for James Gunn and this new the DC universe. I think that he could have done a lot better. I think he played it very safe. I think this is a fine film. I think a lot of people will really, really like it, especially people that want to go see Krypto and enjoy dogs and enjoy dog movies. That is going to be a selling point for a lot of these people. like I said in the beginning, I gave this movie a 5 out of 10. The more I chew on it, I think that score may go lower. I don't know. You know, I would like to at least watch this a couple more times and really chew on it and decide how do I feel when I walk out of it. But the way I felt when I first watched it was disappointed. And I really couldn't shake that feeling. And I wanted to like this because I love Superman as a character. Superman is one of my favorite comic book characters out there. I know I have a Batman thing here in the corner, but like I like Batman, but I like Superman far more. And I'm just bummed out that this is the best that we've gotten from James Gunn with this universe and with Superman, because I feel like he really could have done something special here and chose to play it safe instead. And I think no bigger indictment of that is the fact that as amazing and incredible as John Williams' score is for Superman in Christopher Reeve's Superman, the fact that he couldn't come up with his own theme for Superman, the fact that there's nothing original when it comes to this theme in Superman, there's nothing really particularly original in this plot for Superman, and as comic book accurate as some of the scenes are, it doesn't feel like this is Superman of his own. This feels like Superman by committee. Let's take the best of what we've gotten from other movies and TV shows and comic books and just put it all together into one Superman that I feel like can appeal to the most people possible. That's what this feels like. Superman by committee, the lowest common denominator Superman, not something unique and iconic that's supposed to inspire people or make people believe a man can fly or make people want to race to join him in the sun. I don't feel any of that from the Superman, and I'm really bummed about that. So, yeah. You know, I guess we'll see what happens in the future of all of this. I don't have a lot of hope for Supergirl. Supergirl has a brief cameo in this film, and she's an alcoholic and a partier. And you end up finding out that Krypto's not even Superman's dog. It's her dog that she doesn't really take care of and left with Clark because she was out partying. A lot of cynicism there. So I don't have a ton of hope for Supergirl, which is even more disappointing. But yeah, man, I don't know. That's my thoughts on James Gunn's Superman. Like I said, this wasn't a traditional review. It's just kind of me talking about it, kind of ruminating on it. I probably have more thoughts as I keep thinking more about it, which I'll talk about. But yeah, guys, if you like this video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and keep your eyes open. I do a lot of live streams on this channel, playing games and stuff like that, and also going on different rants, talking about different things. But yeah, I appreciate you guys listening. And I hope you guys, yeah, have a good rest of your day. Take it easy. Later.